Hello, hello. Yeah. Thank you
Oh, hang
very
on a
much.
sec. I don't hear anything yet.
You don't?
Now I got it. You hear me?
Okay. Yes, yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So I like your background.
It's supposed to be the spirit of laboratory medicine. So that's what is being depicted there. Yeah.
I get it. So we've sent you the personality profile, the WACE protocols. We scored it both with American and Canadian norms, but it didn't make much difference.
Right.
And then we gave you the fixture memory printout as well. So you've got the personality inventory in front of you. Why don't we, you have that in front of you there?
Yes, I do. And I wanted, just as a kind of preamble here,
Yeah.
say that it's exciting to me, this result, and it suggests that I'm going to want more testing, because when you read the details, they talk about a lot of things that have been ruled out, but they don't mention like Asperger's and autism and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking there would be some other test that would more specifically look at those aspects, and I would be interested probably in taking such a test if you thought.
I see. Well, you have a very normal profile, I think, and
Yes.
there's no indication that you've got any neurosis or emotional adjustment issues. I chose this particular inventory because when we expect a basically normal functioning individual, we want to look at kind of the dimensions of that normalcy. And what is particularly unique about that individual, as opposed to saying, well, you have a normal profile, and so you're not crazy, and well, we kind of expected that before, right? So that's kind of like nothing new. But if you look at the second page of the profile, the openness factor, there's 5 factors that this profile or this inventory looks at, and they're all specified in the first little panel there, N, E, O, A, and C. And those are 5 factors, and you can see that O is quite almost off the chart there.
Right.
And that refers to openness, and that's a good thing. That shows a great deal of curiosity and kind of looking at the unique contributions of the world. Now, remember, I think I told you about the guy I met in Hawaii on the beach, and he says, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "Anything out of the ordinary."
Yeah.
And he was quite interested in talking to me after that. He was a fairly accomplished guy. I think he was probably kind of like a very, very smart guy. But anyway, he this is this openness, I think, is what that is. And if you look on the third page, it has, or third or fourth page for you, it has descriptions of these 5 factors. And so openness is, that's a very good thing to be open. Who are closed people? What are they like? Well, people who'd be more closed are afraid of new experiences. They're afraid of a lot of fear going on there. Right. They're kind of closed off, withdrawn. They have a a narrow band of experiences. They aren't very curious about anything. They probably don't like to travel very much. They would probably be quite happy sitting at home and watching Oprah.
Yeah.
This is and so and they don't. There's a dimension of personality. It's not described here, but a guy named Marvin Zuckerman wrote a whole bunch about it. It's called sensation seeking.
Mhm.
And sensation seekers, of course, vary, but people who are low sensation seekers would be very closed. And so this is kind of like being sensation seeking. So a sensation seeker might want to try new drugs, for example, but I have other kinds of experiences as well.
Mhm.
You could ask a person who was closed-minded, would you like to go? They've never been to an opera. Would you like to go to the opera?
Mhm.
Oh no.
Yeah.
You can, well, would you like to go to a rodeo? Oh no. Like it's every kind of imaginable thing. These are people who you would find extremely boring to talk to.
Mhm.
They don't have much to say.
Right. Yeah.
They so you can see that having this openness is a good thing.
Mhm.
Now, from my point of view. Now, I suppose if I were an engineer, I'd say, who needs it?
Yes.
Okay. So then the other thing here that's interesting, and I think is compatible with being highly open, is being very low in neuroticism, which you are. Now, what's a neurotic? What does neurosis really mean? Well, neurosis is kind of living in a way that's contrary to your own best interests. It's kind of it's closed to experience, and it's those people often have issues with self-concept, self-esteem, but they're well, let's see, how can I put it? Yeah, I don't. I think that this neuroticism, if you wanted to read about it, you could read Hans Eysenck, I guess. But it's about it's a kind of a malaise, a kind of
Mhm.
a dissatisfaction.
Right.
The neurotic person's never really quite happy.
Mhm.
Nothing can satisfy them. No person can satisfy them. No activity can satisfy them. There's always something missing.
Yeah.
And what's missing is inside of them.
Mhm.
That's what's missing. But they foist all that onto externalities and say that it's these other things that are my unhappiness.
Mhm.
This inventory also thinks that you're an agreeable sort, conscientious, and average in terms of extroversion.
Mhm.
You're not going to be the guy who walks around with a lampshade on his head at parties.
Right.
But you're not going to be shy to talk to people and interact. So I think those are all good things. So I think the main thing about this inventory is that it defines a highly curious and open personality, but one that's not feeling generally dissatisfied.
Mhm.
I would assume Now, I don't know you personally, but I would assume that you feel pretty self-satisfied with your life.
Yes.
You're not usually walking around in a fog and being pissed off.
Mhm. Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
life is good. I would imagine that more often than not, you have a smile on your face.
Mhm. Yeah,
You know,
that's
people make
true.
comment, say, you all seem so happy. Well,
Yeah.
right? Well,
Mhm.
why is that? Well, reasonably smart, and life is good, and you like what you do, and you like your life.
Mhm.
So why wouldn't you be? But you could have all those things and still be unhappy.
Yeah.
So I think that those are all good things. So I think and you can read these other detailed descriptions of each of these categories for yourself. These are produced by the test authors,
Mhm.
and I think they're all pretty reasonable. And I think this is that they have personality correlates over on the 6 page, on page 6 of this.
Mhm.
And so let's talk about some of the personality correlates a little bit, because that kind of gets into, okay, we've talked about what kind of a person you are, but what is this? How does this what does this result in terms of daily living? And so coping and defenses is their first category. And so this would suggest that you cope effectively with everyday stressors. That's highly correlated with intelligence.
Mhm.
I first learned this when I was interviewing drug addicts for a follow-up study in Detroit. And we had a drug abuse program, a heroin methadone program. And I was one of my first tasks, as a young researcher, I was doing interviews with all the heroin addicts. And this one guy starts to tell me about, this is in Detroit, he's telling me about how he and his dad spent a full day trying to replace a taillight on a car. Now, I've done a little mechanical work, and I thought to myself, a whole day on a taillight, 2 guys, this guy is definitely stupid. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you got to imagine if everything you tackle in life is like that, and everything is such an ordeal,
Mhm.
putting a goddamn taillight on a car is
Right.
a whole day prospect. Well, you're going to have a lot of stress.
Yeah.
And because you're stupid to begin with, you're not going to cope with the stress that you have from living very well. So it kind of compounds itself.
Yeah.
So why do we measure IQ when we're doing personality testing? I think I've given you the answer there. Because if you're stupid, you're going to have problems in coping with life, and they're
Right.
likely to show up in terms of adjustment. Okay.
Yeah.
So here it talks about your coping and defenses as being adaptive and flexible. Well, what nicer thing could we say about it? I don't know.
Yeah.
Now, it says that you're inclined to discount physical problems. So, and so you're not going to, pay attention to somatic complaints. Well, you and I are a little different that way. I think I'm more of a hypochondriac,
Mhm.
but you, and it's not necessarily a good thing to discount everything. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Sometimes that can be to your detriment. Some things you might want to consult with another specialist about, as opposed to relying on your own ego to tell you, oh, forget it.
Right. Yeah.
when I want to hear, I guess if I want to hear some kind of response that says it's nothing to worry about, I'll tell my son about some issue.
Right.
He's always, oh, that's nothing, So, but
Yeah.
but at any rate, that's kind of that's kind of that. And we get people who on abnormal personality measures, we call them somatizers. So they translate emotional stress into physical symptoms.
Mhm.
Okay, and what happens really is that they tense the musculature in their body, produces a lot of lactic acid in the muscles, which produces a lot of pain. And then they're constantly complaining about this pain or that pain. So we call them somatizers, but they become very sensitive to every little thing. Fortunately, you ain't one of them. So psychological well-being. This is interesting because it says here, because he is open to experience, his moods may be more intense and varied than those of the average man. Again, I don't know you, but if I were to characterize myself in this regard, I would be saying, well, if you piss me off, I will get very pissed off.
Mhm.
If you make me happy, I'm going to be very happy. You know what I mean? I don't have I'm applying it to you, but what I'm saying is it's not the kind of thing where you're very ambivalent or neutral about how you feel.
Mhm.
I would suspect that when you're dealing with people and dealing with interactions, you know how you feel, and you feel it with some strength. It's like people who piss you off, they really piss you off.
Mhm.
Does that sound
Yeah.
in any way accurate?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good. So we're on the right track here.
Yeah.
This is an interesting thing, and this makes sense in terms of what you've told me about yourself previously. In terms of cognitive processes, is this individual is likely to be more complex and differentiated in his thoughts, values, and moral judgments than others of his level of intelligence and education. Well, that's a good thing. I think that's, again, a good thing. I think it also gets reflected in terms of creativity, because I don't see how you can be very creative if you learn things by rote and accept the facts as they are and leave them alone.
Right.
Creativity really requires that you look at everything you experience in a unique or unusual way, and that you put together ideas that you have that don't necessarily seem the same.
Mhm.
As a psychologist, part of what I do is I try to figure out, if I'm doing therapy, I try to figure out what's the framework that this individual lives in, and can I explain what they're experiencing in terms of their own framework,
Mhm. Yeah.
in terms of their life experience. If they're an auto mechanic, can I describe how they're thinking in terms of a car working or not?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can make these analogies. So, but to make analogies, you have to think in a complex and differentiated way. You understand? You can't,
Mhm.
you can't explain things in terms that people can't grasp.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think you've worked as a professor, as a teacher, you've had to, as you describe what you're trying to teach somebody to people, you have to change up and reframe things in terms that they might that they will understand.
Mhm.
On the next page, they get into interpersonal characteristics. You know who did the most interesting work on interpersonal personality is Timothy Leary. Do you remember
Mhm.
Timothy Leary?
Yes, sure.
The
Yeah.
Moody Blues wrote a song about him, Timothy Leary is dead. Ah, you remember that song?
Yeah.
Or don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Timothy Leary wrote a book on the interpersonal diagnosis of personality. And he had these diagrams and everything and inventories. It was just the most beautiful thing I've read about assessing a personality. And I can't recall it in detail now because it's been a long time, but on one dimension was love and the other was dominance. And here we see these authors getting back to Timothy Leary.
Mhm.
And so you're not, you wouldn't be considered an overly warm and effusive guy.
Mhm.
You're kind of right in the middle.
Yeah.
But if you ever want to read about the interpersonal diagnosis of personality, that Timothy Leary it's just a fantastic thing. And you know what? Nobody knows that.
Mhm.
I got into it because I was doing drug abuse research and somehow his name came up. And so I started looking at what he had done. This is all before he started getting into acid,
Right.
And so the guy was a genius, but unfortunately.
So let me tell you something that's going to surprise the heck out of you. You can easily find a video of me performing at Nerd Night. And one of the things I talk about is David Crippen, who's my polar opposite alter egos, another prominent, physician who's exactly the opposite of me. And he was Timothy Leary's personal physician at the end of his life.
Is that right?
Yes. So there. So you thought I never heard of this Timothy Leary guy, but I know a lot about him.
Yeah, you're the right age to know who Timothy Leary is.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know whether you heard the song or not.
Yeah. I've also heard the song. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But at any rate, he this whole thing, but everybody focused all on his research on LSD, and didn't really understand what he had done in terms of personality. So it's a very interesting book. I'm not sure. I may still have the book actually. I'd have to look in my library. I don't know. So needs and motives. This is all about motivation, and people have different needs and need hierarchies, and what it shows here, and there's a whole. I'm blocking on the guy's name now, but there's a whole book, a personality theory book. I think it's McClelland, if I'm not mistaken, on classifying the personality in terms of needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see here that they've also must have read that book, right? So you got needs. They talk about you being having high levels of needs for achievement, affiliation, change, dominance, exhibition, attention, that is, nurturance, play, sentience, and understanding. So these are all good things. So you have strong, it's not like you're a guy who'd be sitting on the sidelines of life.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not.
No, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah.
That it's really kind of, I think, why do we have these needs? They can't tell us why. Could it be something in our upbringing or whatever? I think that perhaps having the needs having them been met, or those needs having been met, we probably get reinforcement out of that, as opposed to because the child who does not have the needs met as an infant becomes extremely neurotic as an adult, and they never have their needs met. So this is, I suspect that this is reflecting some early priming with a good mothering, and attention.
Yeah, I think that I had that. Yep.
Well, that's good, and that is probably why you have these needs. I tell people all the time that you can't overdo it in terms of paying attention to an infant, and giving the infant everything that it wants or needs.
Right. Yeah.
My wife and I have 2 children, and and she understood that, and I understood that. Our children, as opposed to our nieces and nephews, or don't ask, but our children are very, very independent, to the point they're so independent that, I almost feel like it would have been met better if we'd made them a little more neurotic, because we'd like to connect with them more.
No, you did the right thing.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So I think the that's an independence kind of a thing, right? And so when people who are more independent are self-starters, they don't need someone to tell them what to do. They're when I went to graduate school, the guy who ran our graduate program, his name was Jerry Rosenbaum, and he was kind of like the godfather of psychology in Detroit, And Jerry always, to every class, would give a speech, which he called the Chiefs and Indians speech.
Yeah.
It's not politically correct today.
Right.
But the whole idea was, you people are expected to be chiefs, not Indians. Each one of you here is expected to be a chief. Now, really, nobody had to give me that talk.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody ever had to give you that talk. You were destined to be a chief. So that's kind of like, my dad had his own business. He wanted to. He was naturally inclined to be a chief.
Yeah.
So some of that may be inherent. I know my grandfather owned a mill and ran a mill, and I think, and he was the chief. So I think there's probably something in there. My brother always worked for himself, and my sisters were independent like that. So somewhere along the line, we weren't cut out to be 9-to-5ers, and that I assume is true with you. And so that goes along with these needs and those that independence. It then gets into discussing possible on the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual for Psychiatrists and so forth. They have axis 1, which is your main pathology, and axis 2, which gets into the personality. And so here they describe possible axis 2 disorders. Well, you don't have any axis 2 disorder. You don't. It's irrelevant. And, oh, I should have said this at the beginning, but they do have validity indicators in this personality inventory, and this was a valid profile. So we basically I don't really talk about things that aren't valid.
Yeah.
You know, when I write my reports, I do measures to see whether people are bullshitting, you know,
Right.
and or whether they're not trying on the tests. And then when I was younger, I used to, for completeness sake, refer to it, and now I just don't even write it. I don't write anything that isn't absolutely valid, because you know what you find is that people cherry pick shit out of stuff that's invalid,
Right.
and then go to town with it, you know.
Right.
So basically, if it's invalid, it's not worth talking about.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm sure in your own work, there you find a test that's not valid. Well, why waste your breath discussing the finding?
Yep.
So,
Okay.
so that's basically a normal personality.
Right. So there's one other thing that I'd like to say is, if I come back again for more testing, and I think that I would, if you can find me that Leary book, I would be interested, or even if you can tell me the reference so I can get it somewhere, I would be interested in reading the same Timothy Leary book. Yeah.
I'll look for it.
Yeah.
I believe I probably have